Asheville. This is another one from Hi-Wire Brewing in downtown Asheville. It's called Festbier. Really cool label design here. Really cool can artwork. It's like very minimalistic.
Yeah.
If you guys are just listening to the audio version, it's like this really pretty solid white with these cool blue bands and this diagonal pattern at the bottom. There's like this creamy sort of metallic gold texture, this like wave at the bottom. It's just really cool and clean. Good job, guys. But this is a lager, kind of stepping away from the IPAs that I usually bring to the show. It's a lager brewed with, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, Ursprung, Ursprung, Ursprung Fest Malt from Epiphany Craft Malt. So Epiphany Craft Malt actually also in North Carolina. It's a local craft malt, I guess, distributor. I'm not really sure what they call themselves. But the description that they give of the beer on the website is that it brings a balanced malt character reminiscent of fresh baked bread. So that sounds interesting.
Yum.
I'm going to go ahead and crack this bad boy open. Get some ASMR here.
I feel better
Oh,
already.
yeah.
I feel better already.
Can I go and give this support, guys?
Yeah, so that malt distributor sounds good. I would like to talk to them, and I think we're going to try and get something together with that. My counterpart here, the ginger, is certainly more of a hops guy, but I am definitely the malt one, and I want to learn more. Hey, that looks good.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of head there, but I think it was a malfunction with the can. The little metal tab thing didn't push all the way in, so it made sort of a weird pour. So I got a little bit left here. I'm going to try to let that settle for a second. But off the bat, very malty. I guess I have a hard time. I'm still learning how to describe these sort of beers, but like almost a yeasty sort of smell to it. So I definitely get that baked bread, that bready sort of smell. Let me see if I can get a little more out of this pour.
Yeah, like it's like a sweet bread kind of smell to it, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. It really is. And so speaking of malts and the craft malt thing, I realized as I was, trying to take some notes on this beer while prepping for the show that I didn't know a lot about what role malt plays in brewing. So real quick lesson on malt here, guys, before I get into the review of this beer. It turns out that malting is actually a process of germinating the grains which are in the brew. And that germination happens when grains actually puff up, and that's where they become full of starch. And that starch is what creates the sugars that the yeast feed off of. So, germination obviously is a natural process that happens, but for this sort of thing, for malting, the grains are actually steeped indoors for a certain period of time, steeped in water, until they begin to, puff up and sprout. And at that point, the process is stopped abruptly and they begin the roasting process. And depending on the temperature of the roast, the length, the duration of the roast, and, how they, do the roasting itself, all of that impacts the flavor profiles of the malt, the color of the beer. Malt actually affects color, sweetness, alcohol content, and carbonation of the beer. So the more malts, the higher the alcohol content, because there's more sugar for the yeast to feed on, which in turn creates more carbonation. So really all of this kind of plays into each other. And obviously the flavor profile, depending on the type of grain, and again, how they actually go about malting and roasting, all of that impacts the flavor, whether it's more smoky or caramely or sweet, so all of that's impacted by the malt. So super interesting. That's what we're saying. I'd love to get, especially the folks from Epiphany Craft Malt, which is where the malt in this beer comes from. It turns out that this particular Fest malt actually is grown in Germany and then shipped from Germany to Epiphany. And that's where they do the malting themselves in Durham, North Carolina. And then it ends up in this delicious beer. So let's go ahead and give this a try. Okay, so definitely malty, definitely that bready sort of taste to it. Very well balanced, smooth. I would definitely describe this as a sort of an easy drinker. I could definitely see getting through a couple of these. It's only 5.8%. It's pretty low ABV. But I really love the flavor profile of this. It's not bitter at all in the least. Take another sip. It's got a really nice golden color to it.
Yeah, it does. Not a lot of haziness.
No, not much haziness. Really, now that the pour is kind of settled down, it's not a thick head there. Really good mouthfeel too. Just just kind of coats the inside of your mouth there a little bit, and that breadiness kind of sticks around with each sip. But yeah,
Nice.
overall, this is really, really good and really cool to know that you're drinking a malt. Especially if I were from North Carolina, it'd be cool to know that the malt and everything was produced in the same state and all that good stuff. So definitely recommend. Hopefully, Reese, you can try one of these out one day. Make your way to Asheville. Maybe we'll take a bro trip to Asheville one day and get some beers. But Hi-Wire, really cool brewery too. Another like sort of warehouse garage feel brewery. Very small, kind of an I guess quote unquote intimate setting. But yeah, a lot of delicious beers coming out of there. I've got a few more in the fridge that I'm excited to try. But Festbier, definitely recommend checking that one out.
Sounds amazing, and I'll sign me up, dude. Sign me up, man. I would love to go down there. I think we'd have a great time. Try out a lot of beer. That'd be get a
cool.
babysitter. We're in. But
yeah, man. What about you? What do you got to drink tonight?
well, I have a baked pumpkin ale. I'm not sure how much malt it has in it. And speaking of malt, that the lesson you just gave us was awesome. I didn't really know about all that. So that was very helpful to me, and I really want to learn some more about it soon. But go ahead.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but I think that's just scratching the surface too. Like the more I read, it was like all these crazy like reasons for the different types of like chemicals and different types of like, I don't know, I can't even describe it. All these fancy words they were using as to what impacts the flavor of the malt. And it would be awesome to learn more about that.
I want to learn all about it. Because next time I brew a beer, I want to pick my own malts. Maybe not make my own, but pick my own, add my own flavor profile. Anyway, we got a Lancaster Brewing Company baked pumpkin ale. If you're listening, what we got here is a bottle with an orange label. It's got a pumpkin pie sitting with a dollop of Miracle Whip sitting on top. It's steaming. It's got a cool little look to it, nothing too crazy, but makes me a little thirsty, that's for sure. Their site basically describes it as this: have your pie and drink it too. Bold flavor with a deep amber color. Our big baked pumpkin ale is sure to remind you of grandma's homemade pumpkin pie. Whoa, hey. All right, let's crack this sucker open. It's 7.5 ABV.
Nice.
Described as having a very bold and strong spice to it with some pumpkin underneath. So just on this initial pour, I didn't get a very strong head, but the head that I did get is fairly uniform. I'd say this is probably moderately uniform head on top, and that head is gone already. And we're clear, man. We got clear copper. We got
Look at that color.
Yeah, this is a clear, very strong copper look to it. A little bit surprising for an ale, I think, but I guess it's pumpkin spice. They're trying to stick with this orange kind of deal, so it makes sense that they would make it this color. Let's go ahead and give it let's see. Yeah, definitely. What was that?
So give it a little snifsy.
Yeah, I got to give it a little sniff here. Yeah, pumpkin spice. Every time you get a pumpkin beer, it's never really like the pumpkin, right? It's always those spices that you smell.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's mostly just pumpkin spice and caramel smell to it. Let's sip
cinnamon, some clove.
Yeah, exactly. Oh wow, whoa, hold on. Okay. Just gave it a couple sips. I didn't get the IBU on it, but it's feeling like it's probably between a 15 and a 20. A little bit more bitter than I expected, actually. A lot bitter on the end, but the initial sip is very sweet. A lot of sweetness to it. Sweet with the pumpkin spice, and just as it's going on, I get the as it's continuing and I'm evaluating it, I'm getting the pumpkin, right? The pumpkin. What would you call the pumpkin? Like the inside of the pumpkin? I guess just pumpkin.
Guts.
Pumpkin flesh. Pumpkin flesh. We'll go with that. I'm getting the
mushy
pumpkin
stuff
as it goes on. So yeah, it's pretty light. I think I think for an ale, this is probably what you would expect as far as like hoppiness goes, and but it's nice and smooth. It's not. I feel like it's not too heavy on the pumpkin ale. I feel like this is something that you would really enjoy because of like the light hoppiness to it.
Yeah.
So it's not overbearing either way. Because usually, if you're drinking like an IPA, sometimes they're like very hoppy and bitter. Or if you're drinking a pumpkin ale, sometimes they're like way too much, right?
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, okay, well, that's my only pumpkin beer for the season. I'm clocked out. Yeah, this is something where it's like, yeah, this is right where I want a pumpkin ale for sure. So bravo to Lancaster. I think they did a pretty good job. I wouldn't, say it's the best pumpkin ale I've ever had. But it's definitely good. Definitely good.
Solid.
Worth a shot.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. That's exactly what I think too when it comes to pumpkin ales or any of these like, I don't know, sort of like seasonally spiced brews. If you could, there's definitely a fine line. I mean, I guess everything's kind of subjective, right? Too, it depends on what your preference is. But for me, I agree with you. Like, I definitely don't like the overly flavored pumpkin beers that are just too much. I like a nice subtle spicy hint of pumpkin.
Yeah, I think that's what I would prefer. I think, my perfect pumpkin beer would be, like you said, very slight pumpkin spice, pumpkin taste to it, and then it would probably be a lager. It would probably have more maltiness to it and just a hint of hoppiness. I think that would probably be, where I would land on a good pumpkin beer in general.
Yeah, definitely. And I think David and Gary mentioned when we interviewed them on Tuesday that David said he went and I think, did he say he had every seasonal beer from Ohio or something like that? I think he said some insane amount of seasonal beers. So,
but it was I think it was all like Oktoberfest and pumpkin ales and everything. And he did that like 2 or 3 weekends ago. He went on a tour. I think a tour of I was gonna say a binge, but I didn't want to say that. He went on a tour, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes more sense.
I have to check that out.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, delicious beers. Cheers to you, sir. I think we got some UFC shenanigans to talk about.